What is up, everybody? Wednesday night, 7:30 on the dot. I know Bills Mafia, you're so proud of us for starting on time. I am Matt Parrino. He is Ryan Talbot. This is the Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets, your neighborhood store with more. And we have a jam-packed show for you guys tonight. A few people have been requesting Tyler Dunne, who just started a new venture that we're going to talk to him about later in the show for weeks. He is going to be on the show at 8 o'clock tonight. But right now we are joined by our brethren, Dan Labbe from Cleveland.com, and another advanced media outlet. And we were just talking about it before we went live here. We got two football teams that are winning games. It's kind of bizarre, right, Dan?
It's really strange. You're talking about, a team in Buffalo that broke the longest playoff drought not that long ago, and the Browns are trying to be the next team to break that longest playoff drought here. So it's been a strange, sort of a strange thing so far to have this team sitting at 8-3.
Well, there's a lot I wanted to get into with you tonight because two things kind of were going through my mind. Number one, you have a former Bills player in Wyatt Teller who's performing very well, and I want to get into that with you and talk to you about what's gone right for him since that trade last year, but also starting to look at some potential playoff teams, with the division. I know Bills fans probably yelling, knock on wood, nothing's done yet, but with the division kind of like this afterthought, it's time to start really looking at some of these potential playoff matchups. And I think the Browns matchup is really interesting. Just dive into this team a little bit. There's a lot of similarities in the sense that both teams took that quarterback in 2018 and just, what's gone right for Cleveland this year. And I think that's where I want to start with you. How are the Browns winning games?
They're running the football. I mean, that's really where it starts. And it kind of starts with that offensive line and a guy we're going to talk about in a little while here in Wyatt Teller and how they've rebuilt that offensive line. But it just starts with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt as this just dynamic running duo. And, you can pound Nick Chubb for a little while, and then he can come out. Kareem Hunt comes in, and he's fresh, and then Nick Chubb comes back in, and it's Kevin Stefanski's just commitment to running the football, controlling the clock. That's really where everything starts for this football team. And then, of course, Myles Garrett as well. He's really – this defense is shaky at best, but Myles Garrett, when he's out there, he's been on the COVID list. He's missed a couple games, but when he's been out there, we're talking a defensive player of the year candidate now that he's signed that big extension and he's having the best year of his career. So I think those are really the two biggest things that I point to, along with just, they finally have a head coach. They finally have a guy that understands how to coach this football team, call plays, all of that stuff. It's all just kind of working right now.
So if there was a blueprint to beating the Cleveland Browns, is it as simple as stop the run and make Baker Mayfield throw, or is it more detailed than that?
So I think it's easy to say stop the run because, that would be the way to do it. But this is a really hard run game to stop. I think a lot of teams have done it, and these guys are facing 8-man boxes at a ridiculous amount since Odell Beckham went out with that injury against Cincinnati about a month ago. So, these guys are able to run the football pretty much at will. But I think the key is with Baker Mayfield, just keeping him in the pocket. If you go back and watch how this team has played against Pittsburgh, when Baltimore has had success against them, it's about making sure that Baker Mayfield has to operate and win and throw from the pocket. If you can make it more about him and, at least limit the run or put this team in a hole early and make Baker Mayfield throw and beat you from the pocket, that's really how you start getting turnovers and, have things going your way defensively now, because now the Browns can't lean on Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt as much.
Well, it's funny you mentioned, Myles Garrett at the top there, because I feel like that's going to be in a potential matchup with the Bills. That's going to be a key matchup because where the Bills offense has struggled this year, I think, is when opposing defenses have been able to dial up some pressures, give Josh Allen certain looks that frustrate them. In terms of Myles Garrett and this secondary, where, obviously the strength of the team is on the defensive line, but where is that secondary at with, a couple, first round picks over the last couple of years, or high round picks?
Right now, the secondary is they're kind of grinding a little bit. Denzel Ward is out with a calf injury. When he's out there, I believe he's one of the best corners in football and has that potential to really elevate himself to that level. But they're without him now with a calf injury for a few more weeks. Potential playoff matchup, I'd imagine he would be back. They drafted Grant Delpit in the second round, but they lost him before the season even started. And he was going to unlock a lot of things in this defense. He was going to play in the box. He was going to play in the slot, against slot receivers. He was going to play deep safety. So they went out and acquired Ronnie Harrison for a 5th-round pick. And he was a really good acquisition to replace Delpit, but now he's hurt. He's actually on injured reserve with a shoulder injury, and it's unclear if he would be back in time for an early playoff game. So this defense has been hurting. Greedy Williams hasn't played all year. He's got a nerve injury. I wouldn't expect to see him at all. So they're kind of patching together that secondary right now, and it certainly hasn't always been pretty.
So go ahead, Matt.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So you do have some former Bills, though, on this team, and Matt's already alluded to it in Wyatt Teller. There's been a lot of discussion in Buffalo about Teller because Buffalo's offensive line, they're still trying to figure things out there. And, at least with the Pro Football Focus grades, Wyatt Teller looks like he's playing out of his mind. Is he playing as great as the analytics are saying he is?
I think he is, especially in the run game. Now, he's had probably some issues here and there in the pass game. I think his passing grade is a little bit lower than what you would see. It's a little bit lower than what you would want it to be. I mean, it's fine, but he's really where he's helped is in the run game. His ability to pull, to get out in space. A lot of those big Nick Chubb runs, it's 77 right out in front of him. And really with Teller, this is a guy that I remember when the Browns acquired him before a preseason game last year. This is a guy that I know sort of lost a numbers game in Buffalo, and John Dorsey really liked him. And he gave out, I forget exactly what the compensation was, but it wasn't a ton. And he ended up getting him. Yeah, Teller had to wait for a little while. I know there was some frustration there that Freddie Kitchens and his staff weren't putting him on the field early enough. And then he comes into this year, and honestly, it was still kind of a battle for that right guard job. And I'm curious to see maybe how things would have played out had they been able to get on the field in the spring. But he sort of won by default. And now he's just taken off. And I know Bill Callahan has been just absolutely huge in fine-tuning a lot of that technique that had to get fine-tuned. He's always been a mauler, but they had to really make that technique better. And that's where Bill Callahan has come in, and I think that's been a big step forward for him. And like I said, his pass blocking has been fine, but his run blocking, that's where it's really been elite.
And just off the top of my head, I'm forgetting, how many games did he start last year?
Let's see. I believe he started somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 or 9. I seem to recall him. I think he came in against New England, which I believe was the 8th game of the season last year. So we're around 8 or 9.
So we're talking about 8 or 9 games as a rookie, where I think that he flashed, some decent skills. I think enough to, have fans excited about his future potential. And I think that was kind of where some of the eyebrow raising happened when the deal was made, was that they made a lot of moves in the Bills made a lot of moves in the 2019 offseason, brought in a lot of new free agent offensive linemen, drafted Cody Ford, who I think, even though, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott talked about, his future at tackle, I think a lot of people thought his fit was at guard. So you add all those bodies together and you can get a 5th-round pick that ends up becoming part of the deal that gets you Stephon Diggs. And I think that both teams really won out. But what's, where Bills fans, I think, are the most frustrated now is sitting here watching a veteran, older Brian Winters maybe struggle a little bit at right guard. But even with that said, I think the Bills coaching staff, maybe they're just, saying the right things, but they seem to be happy with what they're getting out of him. I don't think anybody really expected, my point, that Wyatt Teller would turn into this. I mean, is that the kind of sense, not only within the media, but, within the team, that this is kind of like a nice surprise?
It's an enormous surprise. The Browns drafted a center, Nick Harris, in the 5th round. And I thought that maybe he was going to have a chance to compete for and maybe win that right guard job. I don't think anybody expected Wyatt Teller to be this good. We all kind of looked at that coming into this season as, we feel good about left tackle, left guard, center, and right tackle. Right guard, I don't know. We'll see how this battle plays out. Some guys opted out. Like I said, they drafted a 5th-round center who I think probably in a normal year would have competed in that spot. I just think, Bills fans could be frustrated about it, but I really believe this is sort of the perfect marriage of timing, scheme, and coaching. And I don't know, maybe it would have happened in Buffalo for Teller. I don't know, but he really fits well into what the Browns want to do. And like I said, I think when all is said and done, Bill Callahan is going to be the guy that he looks back on and says, that guy helped make my career.
And another play that you guys have in Cleveland that was with Buffalo for a short stint is Vincent Taylor. And Buffalo's had some issues along the defensive line, stopping the run. They seem to be starting to figure things out. But how has Vincent Taylor fared so far in Cleveland?
We haven't really seen a lot of him. The Browns are pretty good along the defensive line, especially on the interior. They've got a couple veterans, in Sheldon Richardson and Larry Ogunjobi. They drafted a guy, Jordan Elliott, in the 3rd round. So we haven't seen a ton of Taylor, and I believe he's been dealing with an injury as well. So if Bills fans are missing him, I can certainly tell them that we haven't seen a ton of him in Cleveland yet this year.
Let's move on to the quarterbacks a little bit, because I think that's, if these two teams do meet in the playoffs, I mean, with two defenses that I think, depending on the day, could have some success against the opposing team's offense. So I think it could come down to quarterback play. And so you take Baker Mayfield now in his 3rd year, and obviously it's been covered on the national stage, and I'm sure in Cleveland, the regression that we've seen out of Baker Mayfield, I almost feel like his career arc is the complete polar opposite of what Josh Allen has gone through in terms of the way that he's kind of ascended into where he is in year 3. I feel like, from what I'm gathering, Baker Mayfield has found a way to sustain some level of competent play at times. He's making some good throws. I listened to your podcast after the last game, which was a little bit closer against the Jaguars, and I'm sure Browns fans wanted it to be. But where is Baker Mayfield, and what is the plan for him, especially once these games get really hard against the top tier teams in the AFC?
It's kind of funny with Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield, how these coaching staffs are handling them. It almost feels like the Bills coaches understand with Josh Allen, you've almost just got to let him be who he is, right? You've got to let him be a little bit of a gunslinger, and you have to try to control it a little bit, but this is who Josh Allen is. With Baker Mayfield, this coaching staff has tried to take a lot of that gunslinger out of him. It really hurt him in 2019. 2018, it was there, and he was having success, but it also came against a lot of really bad defenses in that second half of 2018 when the Browns went 5-3. So, last year, so much around him was just messy, and the coaching staff was a mess, and it just was bad structure. They made him throw the ball way too much. He's never been a guy that's going to win games throwing the ball 40 times a game. Where he's been at his best is when he's right in that 20 to 30 range. And this coaching staff has sort of minimized him. He's stopped turning the football over. He didn't throw an interception in November. He's only thrown 7 all season, which might seem high, but that's sort of skewed by 2 against Indianapolis and then 2 against Pittsburgh before he stopped throwing interceptions all of a sudden. They're rolling him out of the pocket a lot more. They're using play action a lot more, and they've just taken a lot off their shoulders. I know this is sort of a bad word amongst football fans, but he's very much a game manager right now, and he's just sort of a caretaker of this offense. Is that going to be how they see him long term? If it is, that's going to raise some questions about his long-term viability here. But for right now, with the structure they have around him and their ability to run the football, it's working. So they've sort of minimized what they need out of him.
One thing I can say about the 2018 quarterback class is every team has taken a different approach about building around those quarterbacks. How have the Browns built around Baker Mayfield?
Well, John Dorsey took the approach of let's just throw a bunch of skill players around this guy. He went out and got Jarvis Landry in 2018. Now, that was before they drafted Baker, but I think he knew that's the direction he was going to go in that draft. Of course, there was the trade for Odell Beckham Jr. That made all the headlines, and he put a lot of skill players around them. This current regime that came in, obviously, you already have those skill players in place, so this makes it easier. But they looked at things and said, let's rebuild this offensive line. So you had Joel Bitonio at left guard, who's really good. J.C. Treader at center, who's really good. They develop Wyatt Teller. They go out and pay a bunch of money for Jack Conklin. They draft Jedrick Wills, number 10 overall. And that's really what they've done this season to make sure that Baker Mayfield was really protected in this zone blocking scheme that Kevin Stefanski wants to play in. And they went and got a guy in Kevin Stefanski who, if you look what he did with Kirk Cousins, sort of similar things, right? Cousins turned the ball over a lot more, but play action, cut the field in half, stuff like that. And that's really what they did. They addressed it with coaching, and then they went out and they beefed up the offensive line.
let's transition to some bigger picture AFC talk, because I think that we did a little bit of that on the show last week, and having another AFC reporter in the house tonight, it only makes a little bit of sense, because you look at kind of the tiers of the AFC right now and where everybody fits in, and it's interesting to try to place those teams, because you have the undefeated, now 11-0 Pittsburgh Steelers, but I think most people would agree that the Kansas City Chiefs are the team that everybody fears in this division, or in this conference, and also in the NFL, as a whole. I think Kansas City's probably in a pocket all their own. But then it gets interesting, because how do you view the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially from a Cleveland perspective, where you guys are more familiar with them than most people?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you that I think Kansas City is still, if we were power ranking this conference, I think Kansas City would have to be at the top. I think they're still the best team in this conference. Their only loss was to the Raiders, and they avenged that loss anyway. The Steelers, it's always hard to talk about from a Browns perspective, because they've just dominated this football team. And the one time the Browns have beaten them recently was the Myles Garrett incident. So that one didn't even feel like a win. So they've just dominated this team. They did it a few weeks ago. So I think the AFC North specifically has benefited a little bit from the fact that they've got the NFC East this year. That certainly has helped the Browns. It certainly helped the Steelers. I think they are benefiting from playing the AFC South too. They have Jacksonville, Houston, obviously Tennessee and Indianapolis are tough teams, but the schedule has been nice to AFC North teams. So I also think that 11-0 is a little bit inflated. I suppose I could make the case that Cleveland's 8-3 is a little bit inflated right now too, but I kind of just see those two teams at the top, Pittsburgh and Kansas City. Kansas City is the scariest of the bunch. Then after that, it's all about matchups. It's kind of who you draw in that wild card weekend and then that divisional round. I think any team, honestly, on the right week could beat any other team after you get past the top of this conference.
Ryan, before we get to you have a great one for Dan here. I want to ask you, where do you, if you look at how the playoffs would kind of get figured out here at this stage, we're a Bills Cleveland matchup is very possible. And so I'm wondering, who do you think from a Bills perspective is the toughest, possible first round matchup for the Bills?
It might just be Cleveland, believe it or not, just because of the fact that they can run the ball so effectively. And that has been a little bit of Buffalo's Achilles heel. And I know some people would say, well, and right now they're leading their conference or their division, but Tennessee, because of the previous matchup. But I would like to see Buffalo get another shot at Tennessee. I feel like that extended time kind of threw everything off in that game. I think Buffalo matches up a lot better with Tennessee than the outcome showed on that specific night. But yeah, when you look at those wild card teams, those teams that are in the hunt for those final spots, there's a lot of reasons to sit there and say, boy, Cleveland could give Buffalo some fits.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting matchup in a lot of ways, because, Buffalo is the better team, but I do think the Browns present some problems. Like you said, their ability to control the football and run the ball. Both teams have disappointing defenses. Buffalo's probably more than the Browns, because I don't think there were high expectations on the Browns defense. But the one thing that sticks out to me is Myles Garrett. I close my eyes and I envision Myles Garrett coming around the edge and chasing Josh Allen around and maybe making that one or even another two game-changing plays. So I think that's why it's such an intriguing matchup, because I think the Browns can do some things that can cause Buffalo problems, make the game interesting. And, I don't know if the Bills are the type of defense that can hem Baker in and keep him in the pocket for 60 minutes and keep him from making maybe that one or two throws he needs to make in a game. And
that's interesting you bring that up, because I feel like the Bills are just kind of finding that part of their game in recent weeks. And that's something where, in years past, you go back to the Lamar Jackson game last year, Tennessee and Logan Ryan actually came out and said, we took the blueprint from what the Bills did against Lamar to kind of devise what we were going to do against them. And we haven't seen that, to your point, for most of the season, but it's slowly been kind of happening. They've been without Matt Milano for a stretch of time. Tre'Davious White missed the Titans game, and so they've had a lot of different pieces in and out of the lineup. And then you add in the fact that it's been an overhaul in the defensive line. Jordan Phillips is gone. Shaq Lawson is gone. Star Lotulelei opts out before the year. They have a lot of new pieces that they're trying to figure out on that defensive line. New defensive line coach. Well, all of a sudden, the last couple of days, according to Pro Football Focus, and this was a great transition because I wanted to bring this up on the show tonight. 36 pressures, against the Chargers last week. And in a game where Joey Bosa was absolutely dominant, a man possessed, 3 sacks, 6 tackles for a loss. The story that kind of fell under the radar in that game was the work that Bills defensive line did to frustrate Justin Herbert. There was a lot of misfires in that game, a lot of uncharacteristic throws for a guy in Justin Herbert, as I think we've all watched around the league and been impressed with this rookie quarterback. It kind of shades of Baker Mayfield's rookie season. So to your point, though, I think there are so many interesting matchups. I think the real area where the Bills could be having some trouble is trying to slow down this run game, because in the games that they've looked really bad this year, it's been the opposing team's running game. Kansas City comes to mind, where they've had a lot of success.
Yeah, and that's how the Browns would attack it. And the thing that the Browns do, and they did this a few weeks ago against the Eagles, is they were averaging like 2 yards a carry in the first half, and they just kept running and kept running. And the crazy thing about Nick Chubb is, people don't see it as much because he's, the Browns haven't been on national TV a lot this year, so they've seen the Derrick Henry big runs and things like that. But Nick Chubb is just a classic big play back. He'll have some carries where he gets a yard, 2 yards, and then the next thing you know, he's breaking off a 50-yarder or a 60-yarder. I mean, he's got that kind of ability, and you look at him, you don't expect him to be as fast as he is. He gets into that second level, and he's almost unstoppable. So that's what the Browns would try and do in this football game. Look, the Bills would be favored. I would probably pick the Bills to beat the Browns. I just think there's some things the Browns can do that could make the game interesting and certainly give them an opportunity to win it.
Indeed. Mr. Dan Labbe, Cleveland.com, my friend, thank you so much for taking some time out. I have a feeling that maybe we might be able to get together again in a month, a little more than a month, and talk some more AFC, potentially playoff football.
Yeah, for sure. If that happens, we'll have to have you guys jump on our pod too over at Cleveland.com.
Sounds great. Let everybody know where they can find you and find your work as we move through the season.
Yeah, head to Cleveland.com/Browns. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Dan_LABBE.
Perfect. All right, man. Take care.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yep. All right. So that was awesome. I wanted to have him on. I followed Dan for almost 3 years now, and he does a great job on the Browns beat. Let's get into, first, a quick word from our sponsor, and then we'll set up the rest of the show here.
Ready for football? Tops is with ready-to-serve fan favorites everyone will cheer for. Delicious family or party packs like pizza, sliders, fried chicken, barbecue, or beef on whack, starting at only $4 per serving. Perfect for game day and any day. Only at Tops.
All right, Ryan. So it's been months in the making. We've had we just missed on just timing wise. It just didn't link up. We were trying to have Tyler Dunne on. I think right before the season or right after the season started. And I know some fans saw it because they've been requesting Tyler Dunne ever since in the comment sections, and for good reason. I mean, one of the best writers in the country, one of the premier football writers in the country. I mean, there's no other way to say it. He has a new venture. We're going to get into all of that with him. We're going to talk some Bills, some NFL, some Josh Allen, some Patrick Mahomes, all of that. We're going to get into it at the top of the hour, 8 p.m. So stick around. But in the meantime, Ryan, we had some news today. Matt Milano returning to practice. We weren't able to be out there because under the new stricter protocols, no media are able to go in the facility when the practice moves inside. So the Bills went inside today, and I think that they're planning to practice outside tomorrow, but I'm sitting here wondering if it makes sense. I mean, they're going out to play Arizona. It probably makes sense to practice indoors. It's been snowing out here in Western New York, so we'll see how that transpires. But Matt Milano did practice today. Tremaine Edmonds seemed very excited. He seemed very hopeful that maybe Matt Milano could see some snaps in the San Francisco game. And what do you think it would mean to get Matt Milano, and where does he fit in now that AJ Klein's playing at the level that he's playing at?
Well, I mean, he still fits in as a crucial piece to this defense because of what we've seen over the last few years of him in this defense. You know, obviously, AJ Klein is playing out of his mind right now. They have figured out how to utilize him, how to best use his skill set. But when it comes down to coverage, there's no comparison. Matt Milano can come in and cover those tight ends, cover those running backs with a lot higher rate of efficiency than an AJ Klein. So really what you'd be getting at this point in time is a healthy linebacker room in general. And you can ease Milano back in, put AJ Klein in the lineup on those, maybe those early rundowns where you think you can utilize him a little bit better. Made a huge play against the run. Klein, that is, in this previous game where he went around the outside of the edge, stopped the back and kind of threw him out of bounds to set up a fourth down play. So bringing Milano back is huge for this defense, just like getting Levi Wallace and Josh Norman back in the cornerback room was big. All of a sudden, this defense, as you mentioned, is trending in the right direction, and getting Milano back would really put that over the top.
Yeah, Chris asked this question here. I brought it in. What happens if Milano struggles a little bit coming back? And, you know, I think that from what I gathered today, there's going to be no rush to bring him back. You know, he's been out a couple weeks. They did the experiment, bringing him back, testing out the pec. It didn't hold up. They ended up putting him on IR. So at this point, they've weathered the storm. They've found answers in AJ Klein. And also going back to the beginning of the season, another guy that filled in early on was Tyrell Dotson, who I thought was, I remember back to that first game, I think it was against Miami. He played pretty well in spots. And so he is also returning to practice this week, designated to return to practice. They now have a 3-week window with both of those players coming up on injured reserve where they could come off. And so you have depth there now. And oh, by the way, another guy to throw in the mix here is Darren Lee, who I think has played some special teams over the last couple of games. And now you give him kind of some runway to, you know, get up to speed on the system, get really, you know, understand what his role would be if he was thrown out there on the defense, depending on what role they wanted to ask him. I mean, the thing that he brings to the table, Ryan, is athleticism. And I think that what we're seeing scheme-wise and identity-wise now, the Bills have talked about it. Leslie Frazier has talked about it. The players have talked about it. They want to be an attack-style defense. And the more athleticism you could throw at it, the better.
Yeah, and that's another thing Milano does really well is those situational blitzes or those delayed blitzes actually, where he waits back him and you don't know if he's going in coverage, if he's a spy, what he does, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, he's coming right at the quarterback, and that's when you can force those mistakes. That's when you can create those turnovers, and that's what this defense has been built upon these last few games in terms of their success is creating turnovers. So Milano's return is going to be huge for this defense. Now, is it going to be immediate? Who knows? Maybe if he's activated for the San Francisco game, maybe he plays 10 snaps or less. I can't, foresee exactly how they're going to bring him back, but they don't have to rush him back. That's the beauty of this. AJ Klein, they figured things out with him. Edmonds is playing a high-level football because he's obviously healthy from that shoulder injury. You mentioned Dodson coming back. You mentioned Lee. All of a sudden, there's no such thing as too much depth, but there's plenty of options in this linebacker room.
Sharing this out on Twitter because we're going to get Tyler Dunne in here in a moment. Did you watch that game this afternoon?
I did. I did.
For most of it, I don't know if that's what I would call it a game, but it was a mess early on in that game. It was, Robert Griffin III. Unfortunately, I tweeted out before. I'm excited to see him play because, that's one thing. I mean, you think back to the player that he was coming out, and it obviously hasn't gone, the way that a lot of people thought or hoped. And Lamar Jackson, obviously out with COVID, he got the start. It wasn't there as a passer, and I think that almost any quarterback in that system, I mean, it's going to be tough. I think Lamar's got really special skills. They don't have a lot of talent at the skill position players. I mean, you look at their wide receivers, and Marquise Brown had the big touchdown from McSorley. Trace McSorley, stand up, a heck of a play there. But just looking at that game and watching it, it's like I even think that you got a Pittsburgh Steelers team that's pretty beatable all of a sudden.
Yeah, they're vulnerable. They've played some close games. They've won some close games, but they've let a lot of teams in these games. A team like the Dallas Cowboys was competing down to the very last minute with Pittsburgh. a Baltimore Ravens team that has been ravaged by COVID-19 in terms of players who could not start today or play today, were in this game to the very end. Our friend Mike K over at NJ.com before the game started said this game is going to be a lot more exciting than an episode of The Price is Right. And all of a sudden I'm thinking, man, I don't know. I've seen some high stakes Plinko games that I think were more entertaining than this one. It was kind of a dud, a little boring. Also the yodeler guy. I love the yodeler. But yeah, I mean, the game was kind of a dud, but that's what you kind of get when you have RG3 and you have Trace McSorley as your quarterbacks and you're trying to figure things out with rosters that are missing a lot of key pieces.
My man, Tyler Dunne is in the house, bringing you in. We've been doing this now for a couple months, and I always get a kick out of it when we're going and we bring somebody in and they swoop in. It's cool. How are you, my
Chris
friend?
Collinsworth slide. I got an entrance here, right? Something.
Exactly. How you doing, man?
Great. I'm glad we finally made it happen, man. I was hemming and hawing. The go long wasn't a thing yet when we were talking, so figured patience was our best bet. So and here we are. It's good to be here.
And it was perfect. I'm glad we kind of waited because we've had so much to sink our teeth into, and by we I mean the football community the last couple of weeks here, as you've launched golongtd.com, which head over there right now and check it out. Tyler's made it free for the first, little while here. Let everybody kind of get used to it. And man, it's a cool, one thing I want to bring up off the top is it's kind of a cool thing where, they're long form pieces and they're very interesting, but maybe you read a full article one day and then you want to go back and skim other pieces of it. I mean, it's there for you all the time. I'm a junkie of this stuff, but it's really awesome. Tell people a little bit about it.
I appreciate it, and thanks a lot for having me, guys. Good to see you too. Ryan was just down in Salamanca today, our neck of the woods. So
that's right.
Yeah. I mean, I could not be more pumped for Go Long. I just think it was the perfect time to take a chance, to bet on long form, to bet on myself. I just think I look at the game and really reporting and writing through that lens and kind of always have, back to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Buffalo News, Bleacher Report. I've just always gravitated toward the profiles, the features, the long form. And I'm confident there's a lot of people out there who still, want to learn the story behind the story, a peek behind the curtain, an engaging profile with somebody, whether it's, Sammy Watkins talking about astral realms and other dimensions, or, look at the team with, the Packers and that breakup, or, Terry Pagula wanting Patrick Mahomes. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. It just felt like the right time, covering the league for a decade, the relationships that I've kind of developed to go for it. And you're right, folks can read stories that go long for free now. Everything's unlocked for the first few weeks. Just want to give people a sense for what to expect, but please put in your email so you'll get the stories right in your inbox. And absolutely subscribe for $7 a month, $70 a year if you'd like. I think I'm very confident that you'll like what you see. So that's my sales pitch. How'd I do it?
I love it. I mean, and you fit it in. I mean, that was a good, solid elevator pitch at the end there. It was perfect. I got to tell you a story. I'm going to let Ryan come in here and ask you, our first question here. I want to know a little bit more about your journey, but I was kind of like combing my memory, and I couldn't remember for the longest time. I've meant to tell you this for months and now years since I've been back. I was at UB and I was kind of coming up in journalism. I really wanted to be a sports writer, and, looking around the scene, at the time, Mark Gaughan was the beat writer. Rodney McKissick was on the college beat. And so those are two guys that I threw ideas off of all the time. Like, how do you get there? What's the light at the end of the tunnel? And I think it was a conversation with Mark Gaughan, who I still go back to this conversation. It was an hour long. I was sitting in the parking lot at an M&T bank in between dinner with my wife and my mother-in-law, and he took an hour of his time out to talk to a young journalist, and he used a specific example of you and not of how to approach what you want to do. He's like, listen, there's not a lot of gigs in Buffalo. I mean, to cover the Bills, if that's where you want to end up. Look at Tyler Dunne. I mean, he's as talented as anybody out there. He went to Green Bay, he's covering the Packers. And that was something that always stuck with me. And something that I always thought about, like, all right, I am going to have to go somewhere else, figure out, but it helped kind of, show me a path to what I eventually wanted to do. So you never knew that you had an impact, but I always watched you from a distance, and I was like, man, that's inspirational.
That's awesome to hear, man. I mean, Mark is just unbelievable with his time. I had the same conversations with him about life, journalism. That's no surprise. I mean, he's one of a kind. So, yeah, I mean that's exactly it. You know, I'd interned at the Buffalo News a couple summers in college. And actually an interned out in Wisconsin too, living out of a hotel in Shawano, Wisconsin, you know, covering Packers training camp the same summer that Brett Favre tried to come back and reclaim his job. So that was unbelievable, you know, baptism by fire. And actually, you know, this is really deviating, but like the town that I was in, Shawano, a cult like basically was overtaking the town and like buying up businesses and letting them go bankrupt. It was on 60 Minutes. And like they tried to hire some guy to like kill people in government and at the newspaper I was interning at. So that was wild. Shawano, I'll never forget that. But yeah, I mean, that experience, like just one thing kind of led to another. And, you know, being at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, those 4.5 years, whatever it was, with Bob McGinn, Tom Silverstein, Lori Nickel, the best of the best. I mean, you learn something every day from these folks. It was great. And I loved it, you know. I mean, sitting there with Brett Favre down in Mississippi. I mean, who doesn't love that? But Buffalo is home. I mean, Buffalo was always home. I should say the Southern Tier, Ellicottville, Salamanca, you know, was home, but about an hour south. I just figured that would be, you know, pulling me back at some point. It did, and I've been fortunate enough to meet my wife, have a baby. We have a home here in Boston, New York, and everything's worked out perfectly.
It's fantastic. So Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, Buffalo News, Bleacher Report, now to your own, on your own venture. Was this the plan when you were at Bleacher Report? Were the wheels kind of in motion and thinking, you know, I think it's time for me to start this? Or how did this come along?
Actually, no. You know, I really did love my time at Bleacher Report. I have so much to be thankful for, you know, grateful, worked with some amazing people, many of which aren't there, unfortunately, anymore. I mean, they just went a different direction as a business. The writers, editors just aren't there. I mean, they're not alone. I mean, we saw it with, you know, other companies across the sports media landscape just kind of moving away from words. So that happened, which, you know, your head's always on a swivel in this business. So, you know, you react, you weigh your options. I had a little time, you know, to kill. I wasn't able to do anything like right away anyways. And it just kind of felt like the right time because, you know, with the relationships that I have around the league with players, agencies, teams, with a lot of the ideas I had, it doesn't feel too daunting. You know, I don't feel like I'm covering the league day to day. I feel like I'm covering the league through a very enterprising lens, just trying to tell a story that people aren't going to get anywhere else. And when that kind of drives you, it's going to take you places you didn't really know exist. So that's a big part of it. Another part of it, I mean, my dad ran his own business too. I mean, he was a petroleum geologist, ran Plateau Energy. And so he was, you know, putting the dot on the map on where to drill wells. And he never missed a game, never missed a practice, school event with my mom. Our family is as close as a family could be. So that meant a lot to me. And seeing him just kind of risk everything for us and bet on himself and his business meant a lot to me. And I think that's kind of always been in me. My sister has her own gym down in Great Valley as well. So that was probably always kind of running through my veins as well. You know, you add it all up, it just felt like the right time. And Substack is a great place to be. It's so user-friendly, so easy to use. We're sending stories right to your email inbox. There's no app, there's no website. You basically put your email in. Yeah, we do have a website, but primarily it's about going where you are and sending the features to you. So, like I said, people can just sign right up for free right now if they want.
Awesome. I very much suggest that you go over and do that. We have a bunch of people here watching the live show. We are appreciative. If you're new here, this is the Shout Bills Football Podcast. We're joined by NFL features writer Tyler Dunne, and we're going to talk some NFL. We're going to talk some Bills football, some NFL football, because you know we're getting in the thick of this thing here. I mean, a couple weeks left. Playoffs are obviously it's a weird time. You grew up here. I mean, for many of these years over the last 20. Playoffs were not part of the conversation at this time of the year. But I want to talk about Josh Allen a little bit. Your big debut story was about, you know, Josh and, you know, the Patrick Mahomes saga and Terry Pagula. I don't want to, you know, give too much away. Definitely go read it if you haven't read it yet. But I got to thinking, it's something that, you know, I've been very high on Josh Allen going back to when I first got here. Just things that I've seen that he was a very raw player. I thought that there was room to grow, and you're somebody that I've always kind of looked at to kind of keep myself grounded a little bit, because this is my first NFL job and the first real quarterback I've had to evaluate. And I tell myself all the time, you got to sit there and watch a couple really great ones. I mean, Aaron Rodgers of the last couple of years, I mean, he's kind of set the standard in a lot of ways for quarterback play. And so when you're able to watch that kind of bar and you see all these like younger quarterbacks that come into the league and maybe have some success or struggle early on, I think that you're a great person to bounce these ideas off of. So, go into a little bit of the things that you uncovered in this big feature story of Josh Allen and kind of where you're at right now with it.
No doubt. I mean, there's a ton to love, right? I mean, he first of all, he's just fun to watch. I mean, it's a fun experience for 3 hours as a fan, and it's a fun experience for teammates. Talking to those teammates, they genuinely want to play harder for Josh Allen. And I did a big Jay Cutler story once, like an oral history, and I can promise you, former teammates did not talk about Jay Cutler the way they talk about Josh Allen. It means something when Mitch Moore says, "This is who you want to bring to a bar fight." Like, I want Josh Allen on my side. You hear Devin Singletary, everybody call him a dog, and Zach Moss use warrior mentality. Remember that picking up the fumble against Dallas? I mean, that was just a moment that seemed to put the Bills back on the map as a serious contender. So I think all these intangibles, they do mean something. And beyond the intangible, like, he's obviously more accurate. Brian Daboll is obviously the perfect offensive coordinator for him. They're drawing up incredible plays, whether it's sending him on a sweep, sending him out on a route, scheming Stephon Diggs in one-on-ones. I think there's just so much to love. It's just that perspective comes into play with, a conversation with a Kurt Warner, like we wrote, where he watches all of the quarterbacks, and way more than I'll ever watch, every Sunday, and he just doesn't see that mental processing quite there yet, where there's that split second of buffering right when he's got to make a decision, right when a team's trying to confuse him. And he's just kind of certain that, look, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, all this young wave of quarterbacks, like they've got this amazing physical trait. That's not going to win you 3-4 games in a row to win a Super Bowl. Now, maybe that's okay, right? Maybe they win the division and he's a hero, build him a statue. And I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback, but if the goal is to be in the conversation, you're in the conversation with Josh Allen. You're beyond the in the hunt graphic. You're there. If the goal is to win a Super Bowl, which they could do, they have the talent to win a Super Bowl, he's got to make that jump. And I the way Kurt Warner put it, a light bulb just went off. I never looked at ceiling that way. When I think of ceiling, I think, oh my God, Lamar Jackson can probably run a 4.2. Like, his ceiling's unbelievable. Josh Allen can throw the ball through a brick wall. His ceiling's, he really kind of breaks it down mentally. And we have to use the Patrick Mahomes bar. I know fans don't like to do that. You got to use it. I mean, you can absolutely use that as the bar when the owner of the team loved this guy, when nobody else seemed to love this guy, coveted him, was in the film room, breaking it down, begging Doug Whaley, Jim Monos, Sean McDermott, like, let's watch him, let's get to know him. I mean, they go down there to Lubbock. It's incredible. An amazing dinner, commanded the room. Like as Jim Monos said, he just wanted to hang out with him all night. Goes out to the workout, 20-mile-per-hour winds, kills it. Just has a swagger about him, everything you see today. And it gets down to it, and they do the prudent thing at the time. They trade down, try to get him at 27 if he slips. Doesn't slip, have the 2 first. Sean McDermott wants to win now. Doesn't want to try to sell a 10th overall pick quarterback to the team. Sorry, I'm probably going places you want to go to later, but we can go all day.
No, it's all good.
All good. I mean, it's not Josh Allen's fault, obviously. I mean, he didn't choose who his owner loved the year before, but it's going to be hard for me, I guess, to get past that when Patrick Mahomes is Michael Jordan, on a football field.
So you're saying the benchmark then for Josh Allen would have to be Patrick Mahomes or to bring a championship to Buffalo?
I think this team is good enough to win a championship. And yeah, I think so. I think that is the benchmark. And would I be saying that if the owner of the team didn't covet him, love him, and have a chance to draft him? Maybe not. But I'm a big counterfactual guy and love playing that game. Some people don't like to play that game. I think you can here because it was so real, you know? I mean, you could, you know, I sat down with Jim Monos for this story, and I mean, for about, this was, you know, COVID wasn't that bad, so it was safe. I promise everybody. Got together at Resurgence downtown and had a few beers. I mean, you can like see it in his face. Like, we were this close. Like, Patrick Mahomes should be a Bill, and Terry wanted him, and we didn't bang the table for Patrick. If we did, maybe we're still employed, which is kind of wild to me too. Like, the line between being like unemployed and a Super Bowl champion is not as great. It's not as crazy as you'd think. I mean,
do you get the sense with those two that it eats at them a little bit, or maybe a lot?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think they, as they said, and I hope people read the whole story, in that they were really honest with it all. They didn't sit there and say, "Oh my God, we wanted him, and Sean wanted to win now. F that guy." It wasn't any of that at all. Like, even though Jim Monos got Sean McDermott the interview, and then Jim Monos gets fired anyways, like, they were all gone the next day. They could have every reason to be like that, but they weren't. They said, "Look, we didn't like the fact that he was 5-7 his last year. Didn't like the fact that, you know, Big 12 defenses can overinflate things. The air raid, at that point, they didn't really know how that projected to the NFL. You know, even I don't know about this with the Bills. I heard some teams were even worried about his work ethic, you know, and I've talked to teammates at Texas Tech. They used to call Patrick Mahomes chubby, fat, like, go eat another cheeseburger. Like, he's not like physically imposing. But yeah, I mean, I think you add it all up, and like they're the first to say, like, we should have saw what Terry Pagula saw, and we didn't see it. But the day of, they both told Terry, "Look, you own the team, you do what you want," and he wasn't going to overstep Sean McDermott, who by that point was empowered with the roster and empowered with, you know, instilling the process and all of that. And look, and as you find out later in the story in part 2, like, I get it. I mean, it was bad under Rex, way worse than anybody could have imagined. Really, really bad. So you have to trust the pendulum swing back to, you know, from Rex to Sean. You couldn't get a more different personality. You got to trust him and let him do what he wants to do. It might have set a bad precedent if the owner of a team is just going to overrule the coach he just empowered.
One thing from your story that kind of stood out to me was, I think it was something that Kurt said, where he brought up Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson as those, as good as they've been. And really, when you listen to the podcast, you listen to the experts, whoever you feel like that is, those two guys are regarded as like royalty in quarterback royalty, you know, and to his point, they both only have one Super Bowl. And so to dig into this a little bit deeper, is that the, you know, what you're going to be judged on if you can get the one championship? Because I think to use basketball as an example, you have LeBron James, who goes off to Miami, he wins 2 titles and starts to really put his stamp on just being in the conversation with Michael at that point. And then he comes back to Cleveland, and I feel like that one championship changed everything. And I think that Josh Allen is he benefits from the fact of where he is, in that if he did deliver a championship to Buffalo, that one championship to me would sit on the pantheon of all time.
Totally agree. Oh man, if he wins a Super Bowl, like, everything we're talking about, nobody's gonna care. You know what I mean? Like, you win a Super Bowl for the Buffalo Bills after everything this fan base has been through. I mean, the 4 straight Super Bowl losses, the Music City miracle, the drought. I mean, pick whatever you want to pick. Like, he'll be the mayor. I mean, Byron Brown's got to step down. I mean, Josh Allen can do whatever he wants. You
think Terrell Owens will give him his key to the city?
No, he ain't giving that up. No. But no, that's a great point, though. I totally agree. Like, if he wins it, like, if one ring, it is kind of like LeBron in Cleveland. You know, it's just different in a city like Buffalo.
So one thing I've seen, though, about going back to Mahomes here is some people have said, would Mahomes be Mahomes in Buffalo? However, look at that coaching staff that Sean McDermott originally brought in, the offensive coordinator. Would he be the guy that we see now?
Oh, man, I love this conversation, too, because Not that rookie season, because it was bad. And I had heard from like players then, a text here, a text there, like just like beside themselves on how awful that offense was under Dennison, and just boring, blah, antiquated, no misdirection, just nothing that was complex at all. And then you got David Culley, who had never coached quarterbacks before, coaching Patrick Mahomes. I mean, they didn't want to change their offense. They would not have changed their offense for Patrick Mahomes, point blank. It would at all. Now, they did have Tyrod Taylor installed as the starter, so they wouldn't have had to play Mahomes right away. It would have been Tyrod throwing to Kelvin Benjamin still, and Zay Jones and Deontay Thompson, and what was left of Charles Clay at that point. So it would have been bad if he was out there, but I still think there's like this alternate universe. I don't even remember who tweeted at me. I can't take credit for it. It was unbelievable. I hadn't thought of this. I mean, imagine this alternate universe where they're 5-4. They get, Tyrod gets smacked by the Saints at home, and Sean McDermott makes the decision to bench Tyrod Taylor for Patrick Mahomes. They go out, they play the Chargers. Instead of 5 picks, it's 5 touchdowns. They still go into the next offseason with all that money to spend. They buy all those weapons because they were going to get those weapons. Right, they cleared the cap to be able to get John Brown, Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs eventually. I think they still would have done that kind of stuff, and eventually, he's Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes eventually figures it all out.
It's funny.
I hate to be. I mean, the Bills are 8-3. I don't want to just be raining on the parade here.
No, but I think
it's just so big.
But I think that it's important because, like, you think back in history, and I think it was Sam Bowen who was the pick before Michael Jordan, one of the picks before Michael Jordan. Sam Bowie, yes. And those kinds of things, I mean, they live in trivia books for all eternity. And this is a move. Now, of course, 9 other teams sat before the Bills at 10 that could have taken them. I think maybe the Chicago Bears are probably feeling it a little bit worse.
They're set. Come on, they're set.
Yeah, you're right. What am I talking about?
Mitch Trubisky is like such a nice guy. Like you just root for him. But yeah, you're right. That's a good point.
You've done a lot of stuff. I mean, going back through the last couple of years on Mahomes, and you have a story up on him at the new website right now. I'm wondering, what has he said or people around him said in Kansas City about where he ended up, the people that he's around, in terms of helping make him who he is today? I mean, obviously Andy Reid is where you start, but other guys as well.
It's the perfect situation. Even Nick Shimonek, for the story you referenced at Go Long, said that too. I mean, he was Patrick Mahomes' backup for 3 years and then started the 1 year after he left early. He says, like, look, this is a perfect situation for him. The way Travis Kelce kind of sees the field is the way Patrick Mahomes sees the field, almost like it's a basketball game, on that extended play, and just kind of finding the nooks and crannies in a defense. They're on the same page. Initially, he didn't just have Andy Reid, he had Matt Nagy. He had a really good staff there, it seemed, that brought him along. He was able to sit a whole year behind Alex Smith. Oh, by the way, Alex Smith is going to treat that situation a little differently than Tyrod Taylor. And that's not a knock on Tyrod Taylor. If anything, it says a lot about the guy. I mean, he's just going to fight like hell for his spot. I mean, look at Tyrod's career and all the bad luck he's had. I mean, when I talk to folks who know him best, it's like, he would have led by example for a Patrick Mahomes, and he would have saw how Tyrod works. And that definitely would have helped, because Mahomes, up until the year prior, didn't really work as hard as he should have. But Tyrod isn't going to be holding his hand and mentoring him in the careful, calculated, methodical way and Alex Smith did. It's just different points of their careers, totally different points of their careers. So he wouldn't have had that. He does have that in Kansas City. It's just a perfect situation all the way around. And the cherry on top, the number one reason it has worked out so beautifully is Andy Reid and how his mind works schematically. It's on a different level. And I tell you what, and it's just peripheral, but doing these stories, especially with being with Sammy Watkins there for that profile at BR, everything seems to come back to Andy Reid just being this unbelievable person, unbelievable coach. People can't say enough about him. I mean, he's calling and texting Sammy all the time, just checking in on him, almost like a dad kind of figure for him. And then he can draw up offenses at a level other coaches just can't. I mean, similar to like Belichick and all his assistants going to other teams and not doing anything. I do worry. Are we going to see that like with an Andy Reid offensively? The Bears with Matt Nagy, we all thought he was a genius and hasn't really worked out there. So at the end of the day, maybe Belichick is just a genius. Andy Reid's a genius.
Well, speaking of Andy Reid and that genius and Patrick Mahomes, can any team in the AFC beat Kansas City this year in the playoffs?
Boy, that was a barn burner today with those Pittsburgh Steelers. I want to say Pittsburgh. God, I do. I love their defense, the physicality. It's just different. I mean, we're all about the same age. I mean, we all remember like just Greg Lloyd and LaVon Kirkland and Kevin Green and like era to era to era. It's just a different level of physicality, and it's because they hit in training camp. They approach practice different than every other team. And this defense they have now seems like one of the best defenses they've had. There aren't any weak spots. They rush the passer. They create turnovers. They fly to the ball. That gives you a puncher's chance against Patrick Mahomes. And, yeah, I mean, I think they absolutely have a chance. But this is the Patrick Mahomes hour. I'm not going to bet against Patrick Mahomes. He just finds a way. I mean, that Super Bowl, look, he played terrible for 3 quarters. The Chiefs played terrible for 3 quarters. Everything's going wrong, and turns it on when he has to. It's like magic. And I until we see somebody take him down, it's his world that we're just living in it.
One more question before I let you get out of here. It's funny you bring up the Steelers and you go from Bill Cowher to Mike Tomlin and just decades and decades of just competency at the head coach position, something that the Bills before Sean McDermott really hadn't had since Marv Levy. And so that means that people around here don't really know much about that. I mean, going through those years of success. But now with Sean McDermott here, I mean, you go back to 2017 and that offseason where Sean McVay gets hired, Kyle Shanahan gets hired, and Sean gets hired here. I mean, 3 coaches that have had loads of success since, obviously Kyle and Sean a little bit more. Where do you kind of place Sean in that hierarchy of even just the last 5 years, going back to 16, of coaches that have gone on? And I mean, I think there's already, since he was hired, 5 coaches that have been fired, including Matt Patricia last week. So wild. This is definitely an ownership, that wants that continuity. I mean, that was the word we heard so much when, Rex and Whaley kind of, and Russ and all those extensions. I don't remember how it went down, but that was kind of the drumbeat. We want continuity. We don't want to be hiring and firing, and we know they've done a lot of that. So they want this to work with Sean McDermott. And to your point on things, just kind of on rebuilding. I hate to use the word culture, but he has there is something to that. Process and culture, because it was so bad before. I mean, it was bad under Rex. He wasn't just eating dog biscuits and jumping out of, airplanes. He per sources, the team flights, there were flight attendants who felt uncomfortable on those flights. There was a lot of booze on those flights. The local golf course, coaches going there wreaking havoc. Oh, we got the Seahawks Monday night this week. Everybody get on the party bus. Let's go to the World Series and bringing all the coaches down there. It's one thing after another. They had to get rid of that. They had to fumigate the building. It was bad. And for Sean McDermott to clean that up says a ton. He is worth keeping around, and I get the extension because of all that. But what concerns you is, that's great, and maybe that continuity is and matters long term. But look at how he's kind of dealt with the most important position in sports. You start with the Mahomes thing, and hopefully we'll get him in an honest moment to really give his side of the story with all that. But he's touched on it, and Whaley and Monis were pretty honest in saying he wanted to win now. But you miss Patrick Mahomes when the owner wants him. You start Nathan Peterman. Again. He needs Josh Allen to be the answer, and he might be the answer. But to kind of handle the position the way he has, and Brian Dable's a friggin' genius. I think he's one of the best coordinators in the game. You're probably going to lose him. He's going to be head coach somewhere. So what do you do offensively then? There are some moving parts here. I think that kind of give you a little worry, a little pause, because if the goal is the Super Bowl, offensively, you got to put together 3-4 wins in a row, and I'm not sure if they're there yet. Will they be there with Sean McDermott? Maybe. So,
Yeah, I think he's. I don't know how to rank him, but I think it's good. I think it's been really good, and it's worth it with how bad things were before.
All right, before we let you get out of here, there's either a current or a future golongtouchtd.com subscriber that has a question for you. Ryan, why don't you read that one out that you had?
Yeah, I got to scroll back through here a little bit. It said, were you folks always people persons? Wondering if any of you were the shy type before becoming journalists, and how long did it take you to kind of break out of your shells?
Ooh, that's deep. That's a deep question. I guess, and maybe you guys agree, but I think just playing like high school sports helps with all that. The pressure of those moments of, needing to make a play under the lights. I know it sounds corny, cliche, but just with me in my life, I know that's always helped kind of break out of a shell and gain a little confidence. And not saying I'm an expert by any means, but I don't know. What about you guys?
I'd have to disagree with you there, my friend. And when it comes to being a people person, I mean, I saw you maneuvering out in Indianapolis last year, right before COVID ruined all of our lives. I mean, you're a very good people person. I think that that's a key when young journalists come and reach out to me and like ask me questions and how do I do this? How do I do that? I tell them the first thing that I go back to is I took communication at my major at UB. Taught me how to like talk to people. It taught me how to, there's part of that's just you, but I think also you have to build relationships, and that relationship building part of it, you can almost kind of, to your point, correlate it to sports. And what I think, to your point earlier, what Sean McDermott has done a good job of. These guys, to the point where Tyler, I think it's so funny. I was talking to Joe B the other day about this. The tenor of his voice, the vocabulary comes out through his players. Like you talking to Jordan Poyer and I'm like, that could be Sean McDermott talking to us right now. Like it's just they all embody that because they've bought into what he is. So I think it's about being a people person. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I can't relate to Tyler's sports analogy because if Pete Weishin needed a garbage time intentional foul or a garbage time layup, I was off the bench and I was ready. But get
him in the game.
Those 4 minutes a game, I was dynamite. Usually like 4 fouls, 2 points, and a rebound. So I can't really relate there. I didn't have much athleticism, but my cousin Damon. Damon was always the life of the party. So being around Damon, you got to know a lot of people. You had to talk. You had to talk to get a word in. But he definitely helped bring me out of my shell quite a bit growing up.
Tyler Dunne. golongtd.com. Get on it. All of your stories, your features, go right to the inbox. It's an awesome deal. $70 for a year. Man, what more can you ask for? Yeah. My friend.
Couple coffees a month, right? That's what we should say.
There you go. Well, go enjoy your family or whatever you got going on this Wednesday night. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
You got it. Ella is right down the hallway here, and I have not heard her cry, so I don't think we woke her up. It's a successful show. So
hey, you want a little dad moment here? Right before the show, we were started at 7:30. My wife texted me. It was 7:18, and she's like, "My daughter Kennedy's not going to sleep." So I went up there. I had 10 minutes to get her to sleep. She fell asleep. She left right before I walked out the door. But I got her to sleep. I pat myself on the back, go to work, put it in.
Did you give a little touchdown dance, a little shimmy?
I did a little Conor McGregor dance.
On the way back to the office. I like it. Yeah,
I'm failing compared to you guys. My son just walked downstairs in his underwear like 5 minutes ago, and I'm like, I was waving to him to go back upstairs. So
bring him in.
Yeah. Oh man,
awesome. This was fun, guys. Right, thanks so much.
Take care, man.
All right, you got it.
All right. That was awesome. Great time spent with Tyler Dunne, Dan Labbe from Cleveland.com. We will be back either on Friday or Saturday, Ryan. We got to break down a big Monday night football game. We're going to dive into the San Francisco 49ers team. Not a lot coming out of One Bills Drive today on the press calls. I was hoping to hear from Stephon Diggs on Richard Sherman a little bit, maybe Josh Allen, but they just didn't come up. So we'll see what comes out from them, from the players on this matchup, and we will get into it either Friday or Saturday. We didn't really talk about this yet. I don't know. Maybe Saturday because it's a Monday night game, so maybe Saturday instead of Friday. We'll see. Find us on all of we got an email submission another person joining the Zoom contest. If you haven't heard about the Zoom contest yet, every Bills game day, the rest of the regular season, we are going to have a 5 Bills fan Zoom. It's personal with me and Ryan Talbot for 1 hour. We talk anything you want to talk Buffalo Bills football. All you have to do to enter is find us, the Shout Bills Football Podcast, on any of the audio platforms, Spotify, Google, Stitcher. Subscribe, take a screenshot, email it to me at mparrino@nyup.com, and you're in. We'll get you figured out. Yeah. Final thought, Ryan.
No, final thought, just piggybacking off of that. It was really awesome. Subscribe so you can be a part of that show. We did a really early one last Sunday, 9:45 our time, and we ended up having 4 people out on the West Coast, LA, Las Vegas, some people in Utah, and they got up nice and early just to chat with us. But great conversation, great getting to know the fans on a personal level. So we look forward to that. Thanks again for all your continued support. And as they say in the chat here, smash that like button.
There you go. See, that's great. Great content from Ryan Talbot as usual. For Ryan Talbot, I am Matt Parrino. Keep it locked on to Syracuse.com, NewYorkUpstate.com for all your Bills coverage. And we will see you in a couple days as we break down 49ers versus Bills. Have a good one, everyone.
Ready for football? With every game a home game, Tops is ready for you with its TV a Day giveaway. For 6 weeks, every day you shop is a new chance to win a massive 70-inch 4K TV. Shop Tops for the best deals in town, in store, or online to win.